All right, so I'm just setting up the live stream, and we should be ready to go when I can start letting individuals in whenever you're ready.
Okay. It looks like we have everybody except for Richard, and he's not making it tonight. So let's see you're recording and live streaming. So yeah, let's let folks in, and I'll do my introductory remarks once everybody is in.
All right, so it looks like we have attendees joining in.
Wonderful. All right. Well, good evening, folks. My name is Martin Daly. I will be acting chair tonight in the absence of our chair, Rich Berkeley. Since it is just after 6 o'clock, I want to welcome my fellow board members, staff, applicants, and their representatives to this meeting. This is the Board of Zoning Appeals public hearing for March 24th, 2021. From the city, I see we're joined by Luis from the planning department. Do we also have counsel here, Philip? Is it Banachek? Hopefully.
Yeah, Banachek or Banachek, yeah.
Banachek. All right. I want to make sure I'm not butchering your name too bad. I'll remember that. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have enough members of the board here for a quorum. I did want to go over some housekeeping quick for folks that may be joining us for the first time. We do live stream this meeting, and it will be archived on the city's YouTube channel for viewing later on. Luis will be emceeing the meeting controls through Zoom. I really appreciate his abilities there. As we are not meeting in person, it is important to be able to articulate all the materials that are going to be presented tonight and manage the speaking responsibilities. So thank you for handling that. After staff summarizes each case, he will open up the microphone for applicants or their agents to present their cases, after which the board will have opportunity to ask questions of the applicant or their agents. When the question and answer period has come to a close for each case, the board will have an opportunity for public comment. If we do have any members of the public that wish to provide comments or ask questions, please let Luis know via the chat function, and he can open up your microphone for a comment. We really encourage comments and questions from the public. Members of the public have 3 minutes, correct me if I'm wrong, 3 minutes to provide comments. So I urge people to make effective comments and maximize your time. Please restrict your comments to the applications and the projects themselves. I also urge members of the public to supplement their comments in writing if they'd like to. This will allow you to better articulate your argument and make sure that it's on the record. Once public comment period has ended, applicants will have the opportunity for rebuttal and response to public comments. They may, of course, choose not to rebut. The board may act on cases tonight, or we may elect to defer if there are additions to the record that the board feels is critical to have them available for public review for a period of time after this meeting and before the next one. So with that, I'll turn it over to Luis. Our first case this evening looks like application area variance number 65, 66, and 67 for property address 41 South Pine Avenue. The applicant is William Stanley and representing agent is Dan Hirschberg. This is a proposal to demolish and rebuild a porch of lower portion columns with masonry supports and relocating steps from the left offset to center offset. So Luis, you want to take over?
Thanks, Martin. I also want to make clear there was a decision today from the department on specifically the applicability of the ordinance 375 for G3, which relates to the compatibility of infill on the application. A notice was sent to the applicant indicating that this particular part of the ordinance would not be would be rescinded from the denial of the original permit. So with that being said, the other two variances would still be, or the other two denial reasons would still be standing. With that being said, the board is being asked to be aware that that specific part of the ordinance is no longer going to be one of the reasons that the permit was denied. So the only ones that would be up for consideration would be the other two ordinances. So that does not preclude the board from making either a decision on interpretation or the variance, but it does just advise you that there is no, we did not deny the permit, or at this point we're not denying the permit for that specific reason, only on the merits of 375 for G4A, which relates to the materials, and 375 for G4DI, which relates to the style of the porch. So the infill one does not apply to this case. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and unmute Daniel Hirschberg, the applicant representative. And Dan, you should be able to speak.
Thank you, Louise. I can hear you, and if you can hear me, I'll start the presentation on behalf of William Stanley, the applicant at 41 South Pine Avenue. Louise, if you start the presentation, I think we may be able to skip some of the first.
Yep, I just want to note that the applicant has submitted two PowerPoints, one for the set of interpretations being requested and one for the set of variances being requested. So we're starting off with the interpretations.
The infill construction, the top one we can skip. 375-4 G4A talks about original materials retained, and 375-4 G4 D1 talks about original style. Can you go to the next one, please? This one we can skip. This had to do with the interpretation, which is not needed anymore. And this is also had to do with that interpretation. So this one could be skipped too. So now we're to the second reason to denial letter. The purpose of the section in building and streetscape design is defined in 375-4 G1 as follows. The purpose of the standards of 375-4 G1 is to ensure that new construction and significant expansions of existing buildings contribute to and improve to the visual quality of the city, to encourage further investment in the city by reducing the risk of low quality development on adjacent parcels, and to create a more pedestrian friendly street environment to encourage walking, energy conservation, and public health. I would hold out that this interpretation should be denied by the planning board and allowed to and not allowed to continue on this project, because this is neither new construction or a significant expansion. But but assuming that you want me to go forward and interpret that, an alteration is defined in the USGO as generally a modification of or an addition to a structure other than normal maintenance repairs. The applicant believes that this action falls within normal maintenance repairs. The rotted bottoms of the columns had to be replaced. Next. So the other language in G1 talks about the reason for denial should be that this repair project is demonstrated below. I'll skip the next one since it repeats the first column. No, I think I got to go back. This one right here. The repairs of the columns, it talks about risk of low quality development on adjacent parcels. The repairs of the columns and replacing the porcelain bluestone and centering your stairs certainly do not constitute low quality development. And we don't think they impact any adjacent parcels, and that might be demonstrated by the number of people who have signed letters and petitions saying that they're in favor of it. If it would negatively affect adjacent parcels, we'd be certain they would not be in favor of it. Next. We're talking now about the materials. The original materials, the maximum extent feasible, and again, we don't want to talk about that since that's in the eyes of the beholder. The preferred method for the applicant is stone, is not subjected to the rotting that occurred in the wood bases due to the presence of moisture accumulating at the base of the columns. And I went on to talk about how bluestone is defined as something that has an expected life of 100 years, with expected life of untreated wood is normally about 18 years. Next. And the streetscape design issue, in the event the BZA determines that the issue should be reused, we noted that the repair is consistent with the original style and the majority of the appropriate support, balusters, railings, and frame lattice work are all maintained. Materials and elements of constructions which remain unchanged or which will be replaced with materials matching the existing porch are balusters and railings around the porch will be retained. Lattice work will be retained with new lattice work, because the frame of the existing lattice work had rotted. And the width of the porch, depth of the porch, the height of the porch above ground, the height of the roof, number of risers from the ground, slope of the roof, top portion of the columns, all remain as will be unchanged from the existing porch. Deteriorated column bases will be replaced with loose stone, and side walls of the steps were provided as on the historical steps, because the current steps only had a wrought iron railing. These will be replaced with blue stone, and the location of the steps will be returned to their historical location. Next, Luis. The question was raised about applicability of the word style in the term original style. Style is defined in USDO as for the purpose of historic regulations, a type of architecture distinguished by special characteristics or structure or ornament, and often related in time, or also a general quality of distinctive character. Since the site is not an historic district, it's not subject to historic resource regulations, and the style should be considered as a general quality of distinctive character. Again, distinctive character could be certainly different based upon who's looking at it. But the Oxford Dictionary says a distinctive appearance typically determined by the principle according to which something is designed. Example, the pillars are no exception to the general style. I suppose that's sort of on point. Merriam-Webster says the distinctive nature would, in the applicant's opinion, certainly apply to bluestone bases because it says having an uncommon and appealing quality. The bluestone is a common material in the neighborhood, and there are masonry bases on a lot of columns. The combination of the bluestone and the masonry bases might be considered uncommon, and we certainly think it's an appealing quality. We do not think that that the style violates anything in the determination of the definition of style, which is a general quality of a distinctive character. Next, Elise. This is 41 South Pine Avenue, and there's the proposed revision of 41 South Pine Avenue. The one's a drawing and one's a photo, but you can see that everything else stays the same other than the masonry bases to the column and the centering of the steps. Next, Louise. This is a photo of the step taking at 41 South Pine circa 1950. And those steps are centered and they also have sidewalls on them. So what we're doing is bringing it back closer to its original situation. Therefore, we believe that the denial under this section is incorrect and should not be supported. If all reasons are not supported by BZA, no variance or variances should be required. And I think that's the last one, Louise. Do you want me to do the variances next, or do you want to stop and talk about the interpretation first?
I think it would be helpful to go into the variances, and that way we can kind of discuss the totality of the request.
Okay, thank you. I might run out of 10 minutes doing both of these.
It's okay. We want a good record on this case.
I'm going along as quick as I can.
It's okay. Make sure
this is from the letter.
As you need to be.
This is from the letter. Next, please. This first denial can be skipped. We can skip this one too. And this related to the first one. And this also related to the first one. Here's one having to do with the definition. This also had to do with the first infill definition, but it's useful to look at with regard to the variance request. We have photos of 1 through 41 South Pine Avenue, the ones on the same side of the street, the block faces it's called. And you can see there's a variety of different porch supports, and some buildings that don't really have porches, they have a landing. So there's a different thing on each site. And this is made to show that the difference in heights on the buildings are between 2, 2.5, and 3. There's a variety of different heights on the buildings too. Next. And this, these show a variety of the exterior elements on this entire site. You notice the masonry porch supports on 11 South Pine Avenue, and the heavy use of masonry column bases on 23 South Pine. Next, Luis, I've got to move right along. And this is the opposite side, the facing block. And I'm sorry, this is the same side. This is the rest of the same side. And it includes 41 South Pine Avenue, showing the historic one. Next. The building characters of the roof, pitches, et cetera, porches, and other exterior elements conform to the residential buildings on the facing block face. Well, like you can see, there's all sorts of roof gables, roof pitches, porches, inclusion or not. Some don't even have porches. So we think that there's no consistent exterior elements of the building on the facing block face. Next, Luis. The apparatus of the porch maintenance and repair has been designed. This had to do with the infill question. You can skip this one. This is a variance we no longer need. This is the second variance, and this has to do with the materials of construction. I reviewed part of this at the first presentation. Has to do with longevity of the wood versus longevity of bluestone. Next. And to show you bluestone as a relatively common material on the site, we have some photos of a few bluestone walls in the neighborhood, and it's used quite extensively. The bluestone wall on 41 South Pine is at the top. It unfortunately is partially buried by snow, but it's a substantial bluestone wall on the sides of 41 South Pine Avenue. Next. Masonry columns of alternative materials is located within the neighborhood. These are a number of pictures from within the neighborhood. This exceeds the block face or the facing block face, because the question was made whether or not we're consistent with other things in the neighborhood. So I think we are, because these are quality, with the quality and appearance of traditional materials, because these are traditional materials on these other faces. Next, Luis. Based on previous photo documentation, original materials, the applicant believes that this variance should be granted. And next, we have the final variance, which has to do with appropriate original style, appropriate support, balusters, and lattice work are all maintained. Materials and elements of constructions which remain unchanged. I reviewed these last time. The materials instruction which will be changed are the interior column bases, which will be replaced with bluestone matching the adjacent stone walls. Steps will be replaced at the center of the porch to match the historic locations. The step will have new sidewalls that are similar in size and petitions to the historic sidewalls on the steps, but are constructed of bluestone. Next. This goes through style, and I already covered this under the other information, because the word style is used in there. We think the style does not preclude the changes we're making. Next. This is a map. We had to use 2 pages for it. These are all the locations of houses with masonry columns. This is on one side of Western Avenue, which include, there are a number of units in there. It includes the area. This is north of Western Avenue. The next slide, Louise, shows south of Western Avenue. There's actually more building south of Western Avenue, and this is the side of Western Avenue that North 41 South Pine is. So within about 3 blocks of the site, we've identified a significant number of units which are do have masonry columns. Next. This is for the same pictures again, which show it as it is now, as it was prior. The fire, by the way, had a significant fire. It's going under rehab now to solve the fire, and so essentially it doesn't look like that now. But we hopefully it will look like the picture on the right. Next. And phone of the center steps, and this says we believe it's in keeping with the original style and retains the major elements mentioned in this section of the code. So I think I'm done now. Thank you.
Well, thank you for summarizing the case, Dan. Appreciate that. Do any members of the board have questions that they'd like to ask? Is anyone muted that's trying to ask a question? I'll ask a couple. I'm trying to channel my inner Rich Berkeley here and do things the way he does, which is usually he puts everybody else, out in front, and then he follows up with questions. So I've done that. I'll jump into mine. In using the same sort of analogy for repair versus replacement, I noticed in your testimony that you considered this, or the applicant considered this, more of a repair as opposed to replacement. When I consider a house repair, to say a broken window, I'm thinking of repairing the glass in the window. When I'm thinking about replacing a window, I'm thinking of replacing the window, the casement, the frames, everything within the structure of that. Could you articulate why you see this as a repair of the porch instead of a replacement of critical elements of the porch?
Well, essentially, I believe it's a repair because the original columns were rotted and they definitely had to be replaced with something. And the fact is that the applicant chose to replace them with a additional compatible material. I still think makes it a repair. You had to repair. The repair had to be done. Now, it's a repair or a replacement. It's a replacement of the original material, but de facto, it's what was repaired. The steps also required repair, but in the tune of doing that, they also relocated them to the center location. So I think that this falls within the definition of repairs, although I think there's sufficient determination made there that someone could think otherwise.
The damage or the necessitating factor in choosing the bluestone and some of the materials that deviated from the wood materials was related to moisture, if I'm recalling your presentation correctly. Was there any consideration by the applicant to install a gutter on the roof, French drains or weeps or something to get moisture away from the porch, or change the slope to prevent pooling of water to rot the materials as a measure to protect?
No, I don't think the applicant thought of that at all. They would have to be significant reconstruction of the porch, because the porch has actually no pitch along it. And consequently, even if the gutters prevented any roof drainage from coming on, windblown rain, et cetera, would get on that porch, and the wood columns would eventually rot. It also happened to the frame of the lattice work, which you can see on this picture is a fairly wide frame. The bottom of that was all rotten too, and that was close to contact with the ground, and that probably caused that rotting. And I think it was inevitable that the rotting would occur. It was a selection made by my client to replace it with bluestone because he thought essentially it constituted a repair, and that he would repair it with what he considered a better product, something that would be more durable and would certainly be considered a nice view for the porch. So again, all those decisions were made by the applicant, not believing there was a differential question between repair, replacement, or reconstruction.
Do you have any other questions by the board members? I've got one more, and then I guess if there's no questions, we can open it up to public comment. If you could go back, cycle to the rendering of the porch for a moment, previous slide. Yes, thank you. On this particular rendering, I'm not exactly sure about the columns. The two interior columns look to be replacement of the cylindrical columns. The two columns on the outside seem to be a mix of the cylindrical column and what is a split between the column and some other type of support. Is that a design element? Is that on purpose? Could you talk to that?
I wish I could. This drawing was made by the mason that was doing the column base repair. Maybe during the comment period, I could ask either Mr. Stanley or Joanne, his wife, explain what that element shows.
Okay, yeah, because there's some clarity of whether those are full columns or whether they're a mix of a column and what appears to be a 2x4 or a different type of support is something I'm curious about.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Hirschberg, can you articulate for us how you think this is the smallest variance being asked from the board?
Well, we think that much of the columns had to be replaced. And because it had to be replaced, it's the smallest level of variance we need. The whole question is the material replaced with it within the confines of the materials of construction that should be permitted? I don't think the level of our variance requests is questionable. That much of the column had to be replaced. The question is the material was replaced with, and I don't see how that has to do with minimal or maximum level of variance required.
Well, if all you did was repair the rod and base of the existing columns and not change at all the, where the stairs are, and not change any of the materials, would you then still need a variance?
If it was replaced with exactly the same wood columns and the steps were left where they were in their non-historic position with the metal railings, which are non-historic, if it was left like that, the applicant could have just applied for a building permit like he did, and it would have been accepted. However, I believe in the context of the question you normally ask with the variance is it the least variance you would require? It's the least variance that's required to accomplish the goals that the applicant has for the site, to replace columns with something that's more permanent and to return the building to its historic steps to the historic location. So I think from that standpoint, this is the smallest variance that would be required to accomplish those goals.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dan, is the floor of the porch also going to be a bluestone or a masonry product?
No, that's wood.
Be wood.
That stays wood.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions from board members before we open it up for public comment? If not, I think we can move to that phase.
Okay, so we have one person signed up so far, Leah Golby. I'm going to go ahead and unmute her. Leah, if I could just have you state your full name and address for the record, and then you can continue with your comments. One moment. Okay, you should be good.
Get on mute. Okay.
Go ahead, Leah.
All right, can you hear me? Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Great, hi. So looks like you get to look at me with my bike helmet on, that's fine. Yes, I am, my name is Leah Golby. I think Louise maybe wanted me to give my address, but I'm not sure. So I'll just say my address is 550 Myrtle Avenue. I am the co-chair of the Zoning and Code Enforcement Committee of the Pine Hills Neighborhood Association, and our committee has been following this application since before it came to the board. We only recently made a decision just a couple of days ago as a committee, and then we brought it to the board to support the applicant. We are generally pretty hesitant about taking a position with items before the Board of Zoning Appeals. We have a great respect for the work of the planning department, the USDO, and in the USDO in general. However, with this piece, we all, I don't know. Okay, now I'm just speaking for myself, not necessarily we all, though there were other members who agreed with me that we were really surprised to even see this application or this denial and this application come before the BZA. This did not strike me as the typical BZA case. We have had several porch cases in Pine Hills that have gone before the Board of Zoning Appeals, and they are usually one of two things. Either the property owner removed a porch when they were not supposed to, and they were cited for that, or the porch was enclosed or wanted to be enclosed. And this didn't strike me as something that was such a variant that would wind up in front of the BZA, and we all were pretty we were pretty surprised by that. A lot of our discussion wound up being around the materials. Because the placement of the steps makes sense that it makes sense that they would want to move it back to its original spot, and I think that would actually be in keeping with the code and with the original traditional neighborhood overlay district language, which was then incorporated into the USDO, which I believe, is really the citation for the materials comes from the traditional neighborhood overlay district. So our discussion really was around the materials, and after listening to the questions of the BZA and during the two workshops, and learning that most of the elements were going to remain and the style is going to remain the same. They're not changing the style of the porch. I have seen some porches in Pine Hills that have deviated from the traditional style. This does not. It uses some different elements, and we agreed that that it would be okay. So we do support the applicant, and I just want to bring up one other thing because I tend to do research when I'm working on something. And so I found an article from the Times Union from 1992 when the traditional neighborhood overlay district was first being introduced to the Common Council. And while what I was hoping to find was the purpose of it, because my very layperson understanding of having been involved with neighborhood stuff for years was that people were getting concerned about porches being enclosed and vinyl siding, and those were kind of the main drivers. But drivers behind some of the push for the traditional neighborhood overlay district. However, that's only my guess. I was hoping the article was going to give me some information, and it didn't give me any information about that, unfortunately. But it did have an interesting quote that I hope that the BZA will take into account when you are contemplating this case. And this is a quote from a professional in the planning department in 1992. He says, "We don't see this as a restrictive tool. We really want to try to work with the property owner and encourage them to do as sensitive a job as possible. We don't want to be in the business of saying, no, you can't do that." And I think that this is something where the city does not want to be in the business of saying, no, you can't do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Golby, for your comments. Louise, have we received any communication from the neighborhood association as to a letter or a summary of their comments?
Yes, the letter was added to the file, and it should be reflected up in the public website shortly.
Has that been up for a week, or is that something that was added to the record recently?
That was added to the record today.
Today, okay. So we haven't had a chance to review it, or the public to review it. So looks like we have a hand. I'm not trying to do your job. You're the radio MC here, but looks like we have another person that wants to speak on the matter. Raise their hand.
Yep. So we have Joan
The applicant?
Sternheimer. I'm just going to go ahead and allow you to speak. Just please make sure to pronounce your name and your address, please. Joanne, you should be able to provide your commentary.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi. Good evening, everyone. This is Joanne Sternheimer. I live at 41 South Pine. I am just responding to answer some of the questions raised by the acting chair. With respect to the rendering, that drawing was made to show us what the stone would look like in part, and also to show us what the structure would be in part. So those end columns that you see, the existing columns are actually column shells. There is an actual structural support inside of them. And that rendering is showing that structural support. The actual shell itself will go all the way to the ceiling. That was done to show what would be holding the roof up, not to show what it would really be looking like. The other thing that's not apparent from looking at the rendering is, because this was provided to us to show us what the stone would look like, we didn't put in that the skirting will be exactly what is on the house right now. So there will be that same square weave flat skirting on the porch. And then lastly, the only other thing I would say, if your view of the PowerPoint looked like mine, the speaker square in the top right of the screen was covering up the pictures of the stone walls, one of the pictures of the stone walls and that rendering. And you can see from the screen that's up now that there's a stone wall in front of the house, which is, doing the flower beds. But the one that was covered up is showing that there's a stone wall that runs the entire length of the house on the north side. And then the one that Mr. Hirschberg pointed out that was partially covered with snow, that's a stone wall running about 2/3 of the length of the property on the south side. So I just wanted to point that out because it didn't seem to show that very well. With respect to the rotting, I also wanted to answer the acting chair's question that there are in fact gutters on the porch. They work. There is a slight slope to the floor of the porch. And despite that, there is significant rot at the bottom of those column shells. Honestly, from both sides, from the inside, the porch side, and from the outside as well. So I just wanted to clarify that for the board.
Thank you very much. Did somebody mention, like, all of a sudden at the very end of the testimony, there was something Dan said, I thought fire, he said something about a fire. Is there a fire at the property? That, I apologize, I didn't notice that at the I was absent for the prior meeting, and then the workshop before that, I didn't hear that in the program. So
Joanne can probably tell you the how difficult it was. They haven't lived in the house for like 4 weeks, I think, Joanne, since the fire, 4 or 5 weeks since the fire occurred.
Okay. Well, sorry to hear that.
He can hear me.
You have to raise your hand.
Okay. Do we have any other questions from the board members? Well, I don't believe we have some additional items for the public record, so the board will not be taking any action on this case. But I want to thank you for your presentation and supplementing the record. I know there's been a lot of work on this case and materials added since we've had the 2 workshops, and I very much appreciate that. I do look forward to the opportunity to see the communication from the neighborhood association that they submitted. So I want to thank you for your time this evening presenting on this case.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to proceed to the next case, Louise?
Right, so the next case is 899 Western Avenue, and the representing agent is Thomas Wheeler. Thomas, you should have the ability to speak, and if there's anyone else that is going to be presenting with you, let me know and I can unmute them.
Hello, I'm Tom Wheeler with AJ Sign Company. Also on the call tonight is Robert Romer with Capcom. I don't know if you can see him. Basically, what we're looking to do is a new monument sign for the branch at 899 Western Ave. Capcom, throughout the capital region, has rebranded. This is the last site to go through the municipal process. The new brand is a square sign. So their logo is now a square. In the past, it was a rectangle, and now we're going to a square, as you can see in this slide. So this sign is exactly identical to the one in Malta. We have brick columns with a brick base with a sign in the middle. The new sign, in order to keep the logo square, bring it out to the edges of the columns, it comes up higher, which gives us the height variance we're asking for, and it also adds square footage. The new logo is actually smaller than the old logo, but the sign itself becomes larger so we can get that square. We look at some alternatives, such as make the sign smaller, but then it doesn't touch the outside of the columns, and that's where the structure is. So this brick base would not work. Removing the brick base would have a significant cost and huge environmental impact. We need to jackhammer all that out and start over. The cost is around $15,000. We're trying to avoid that. And this sign, again, also matches the one in Malta. The lighting is going to be a little different. The existing sign is lit with floodlights. You have a lot of light spillage. The new sign is internally illuminated, where just the letters are cut out of an aluminum backer, and they're acrylic, so the light is much softer than what we have now. It's more of a glow. It's LED, so it doesn't have a far throw. So you're gonna have a lot less light pollution than you do with the existing sign, which will be nice. So really, we're just trying to use this base and bring this last Capcom branch to match the branding that's gonna start taking place throughout all the other branches in the capital region.
Thank you for providing the testimony for this project. Do any of the other board members have questions they want to propose first? I've got a couple.
I had a question
Go
just
ahead.
about the, I think there was in the last report, a description of light pollution or something in the report. If you could speak to that a little bit. I wasn't exactly sure what was meant by that.
Thomas, I believe you're muted still.
There we go. The existing sign has floodlights. Floodlights tend to cast light kind of all over the place. You know, it goes around the sign. To me, that's light pollution. It's not very night sky compliant. You know, it casts up into the night sky. Whereas the new sign is internally lit. Just the letters are cut out, so the light comes through. It's filtered through the acrylic. It's much softer. It provides basically the letters have a soft glow, and it doesn't really cast light any distance. So to me, the new sign is going to have a lot less light pollution than the existing.
Thank you.
wanted to ask about the size of the sign within the structure. Is it possible for the applicant to replace the sign in the structure with something that's suspended or attached to the sides of the monument without the necessity to remove the brick monument or structure around it by simply attaching a smaller sign with, iron or steel or something to attach it, so thereby reducing or eliminating the need for the variance, but retaining the brick structure that the sign is located in?
That same point was actually brought up in Malta. One of the issues is we're not, the inside of those columns is not finished nice brick like the outside, so it's really not, it wasn't made for that. It's not gonna look good. The sign's gonna kind of float in there. It would really not be the look that the brand's going for. The logo itself, as I said, is actually smaller in the new sign, with the new branding, than the existing sign. So that logo is going to get tiny, and honestly, it's just not going to be aesthetically pleasing. And again, you're going to have masonry that's not finished on the inside of that.
Because the current sign fits underneath what I would estimate are those concrete caps, isn't there changes to the monument itself in order to go from a rectangular sign below the caps to a square sign that protrudes above them?
Yeah, what we're going to do is we're going to pop those caps off, slide them out so they flush up to the new sign, and project off the outside a little more. So yes, we already did investigate that.
You mentioned since the sign will be lit electronically from the interior, are there elements of construction within the base that require you to make modifications in order to support the infrastructure to provide electricity to the sign as opposed to the floodlights?
No, what we're going to do, we're going to take the power from the floodlights and we're going to just sneak a conduit up that brick, paint it red so it blends in at the lowest point and go into the sign that way.
So none of the conduit will be visible through the sign, it'll come up through the bottom?
Yeah, it'll come up through the bottom.
Okay. I guess a question for the planning department, when you're looking at calculating the logo, is the logo calculated from the entire shape of the sign, or is the logo calculated from the space contained within the center blue square? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's a square and what I would consider a frame, which is the same as the square. How does the planning department calculate the size of the sign when you have that type of treatment?
Right. So we don't differentiate when it comes to like a solid sign like this. So we would encapsulate all of it because we don't want to make the determination of what is a sign, what is not, and get into the free speech thing. So we essentially, a sign could be a blank, a non-lettered sign too. So you could have like shapes as well, and so. So we don't differentiate anything on a solid sign. Everything that's within the boundaries of the solid sign would be considered part of the signage. If it was something like a channel letter signing, where you have letters attached to like a rail system, in that case, there's a negative space where no signage exists, and so that way we calculate the square footage of each individual letter or the shapes within the rail system. And that way we calculate it differently. But for every other type of sign, except awning signs, which we calculate the same way as rail signs, we calculate it as everything within the mounted sign.
Are neon signs considered rail signs? How are they calculated?
Yeah, they would be considered the same type of signage, since they typically have what's part of the neon sign would be what's part of on the mounted bracket, the same way the rail system would be typically.
So the base and background of a neon sign is calculated in the size?
So no, it would be the letters. So if it's like a neon sign that's attached to with just a supporting bracket and it's not attached like a solid base, then we would be looking at applying the square footage of the letters themselves. Generally, to avoid having to kind of get into the how do you measure it, the scripture of neon or anything like that, we take the general area of where the neon is, and then we draw like a square or a rectangle, whatever the predominant shape is, and then we divide that by 2 to account for the negative space in the areas around the neon itself. And that would be the same way we do with rail signs too.
Do we have any other questions from the board?
Just a clarification, maybe. Did I understand that you're saying that if you wanted to keep the shape of the square shape of the new sign to match with your company, rebranding, and not need a height variance, what you're saying, that's not feasible because then the sign would have to be so small that you're saying it wouldn't be readable?
That's correct, because their new branding is a square. If we didn't have a height variance, we'd have this tiny little square in this masonry structure. So at that point, the structure really wouldn't work, and we'd be starting over, which is a huge economic impact to Capcom we're trying to avoid.
And just another clarification, and I think it goes to Martin's point. I guess I'm looking at what we're looking at right now. I don't know if you can see it, but like the current sign compared to, the proposed sign. And in the proposed sign, there's, it shows an image of the sign. It was in the monument. I guess since the current sign is a rectangle, the new sign is going to be a square. In the photo you have of the sign in the monument, it does seem like the sign will just pop in pretty much right where the current sign is. So this new sign is as wide, although it's a square, it's as wide as the current sign, and it just fits in the monument just right.
Exactly. Yep. The same width as the current sign, but since it's a square, not a rectangle, we had to add some height.
Okay. Thank you.
Seeing that we don't have any more comments from our board members, do we have any public comment? Do we have any members of the public that wish to speak?
I don't see any other members in the public other than the applicants.
Okay. Do we have any members of the board that wish to make any motions?
Sure. I'll make a motion. Louis, can you show the requested variances, please? I'll make a motion to.
Maybe let me pull up the actual agenda because I think the proposal is wrong on that one.
Thank you.
Yeah, just as a note, the board is not considering any fence for this project. I think that's just a copy and paste from the another application. This variance request is strictly for as it relates to the size and height of the sign. There's no portion of this project that relates to fences.
Okay.
Thanks.
The board to grant the 2 area variances, the one to allow the 8-foot tall monument sign where 5 feet was the maximum height allowed, as well as to allow a 50 square foot monument sign where 32 square feet was the maximum size allowed. I feel like the representative for the applicants tonight provided good additional information explaining the alternatives considered. I don't think it affects the character of the neighborhood. also explained the changes properly that are being made and proposed. So it seems like to achieve their goal of the new rebranding, this is the smallest variance they could ask for. So.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have coming to a vote? All in favor? Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Do we have any nays or abstentions? Looks like the motion carries.
Thank you.
That was the last case that can be taken action on. The other cases were withdrawn. We have 961 State Street, which was withdrawn and was gone over in the last workshop, but I just want to clarify that during the meeting as well. The applicant has not provided additional information that the board has requested and was advised that they can resubmit their application when they have that information. And the same for 161 Washington Avenue Extension, area variance 0073. The applicant has their application considered withdrawn and has expressed possibly reapplying in the future when they have more information to provide to the board. The last remaining item is 36 Judson Street, which, as I understand, the board cannot take action on as there's still ongoing negotiations between the applicants. And 1415 Washington Avenue and 271 Clinton Avenue. Both of these are still under planning board review and secret determination has yet to be made. As such, the board cannot make a determination on this until that has happened. And that has not happened as of yet. So that would conclude the active items on the agenda at this time.
I'd let staff know, at least personally, it's concerning that we still have the Judson Street carried on our agenda for several months without anything being added to the record. And that we haven't heard anything as far as how the city is managing to bring that to a conclusion or negotiation or settlement with the parties. So it's my hope that they can either prioritize a settlement to make sure to ameliorate that situation, or that the board needs to take action because it's been sitting on our agenda without any material items added to the record for that particular case. And it's just not good practice to have a case sitting in limbo for months at a time without any determinations. I don't think that's fair to the applicant. It's not fair to the city, and it's not fair to the property owner as well. So I think we need to come to a resolution on that, and I've relayed that concern to the city. I'm not sure how other board members feel. I'm only speaking for myself, but.
Martin, I think, I don't disagree with what you're saying. I think from a practice standpoint, I agree with you. I don't like having things sitting and just, I think the last I heard, and maybe Amy gave us a brief update at the last workshop maybe, but I think the one thing that makes me more okay with the fact that we've had this sitting there without really any update is that my understanding is both the city and the property owner, because I think actually there's no technically, or I guess the applicant is the city, right? It's the common council. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not the property owner, but so I think my understanding was my last update is that both the property owner and the city representatives are comfortable with keeping negotiations going on this case and with letting this sit. So that's my comfort, I guess, what makes me more comfortable with this sitting.
Yeah, it shouldn't be something that's just continuing on the pending agenda, in my view, without any potential material changes. If they're going to come to a settlement, then they should be doing that. Rather than have this sit on our agenda and make it look like we're not taking any action. So.
Also, the weather is getting nicer. So sometimes the issues that present themselves more in nice weather.
That's a good point. Yeah, summertime tends to bring more people outside, so. And hopefully, with any luck, I'm knocking on wood right now, having gotten my first vaccination, the COVID will be in the rearview mirror and we'll be meeting in person soon. So who knows what soon means, but I'm optimistic that we can actually start to have public hearings again without too much delay. Have any other business that the board members want to bring to the attention of the board? Well, with that, thanks, Louise, for shepherding us through this. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Do we have a
Second.
second?
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy your Wednesday. Woohoo!
Yeah.
You too.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.